All right, can everybody hear me fine? All right. All right, so today we're going to cover chapter 1. We'll be talking about keeping food safe. So we're going to identify what a foodborne illness is and how we determine when one has occurred. We're going to discuss challenges to keeping food safe, the cost of a foodborne illness, and the different contaminants that can make food unsafe. And this is going to be just an overview. And this says the same thing. We're also going to talk about populations at high risk for foodborne illness and responsibilities of the restaurant managers for keeping food safe. So our first definition, I think this is on your handout. A foodborne illness is a disease transmitted to people through food. So one that you've probably heard of is salmonella. Can y'all see the screen okay? So you can turn the spotlight out. A foodborne illness is considered an outbreak when a few things happen. 2 or more people eating at the same place have the same symptoms after eating the same food. So if I would go to McDonald's and order chicken nuggets and I got sick, and somebody else went there and got a burger and got sick, it wouldn't necessarily mean that there was an outbreak, although it's possible. There has to be an investigation conducted by state and local regulatory authorities. Here in Louisiana, we have parish health departments that come around and do inspections. And if we had people report to us that they got sick after eating here, then we would have to call the health department and report that. And finally, the outbreak has to be confirmed by laboratory analysis. So challenges that we have. Okay, by the time when you're working in a kitchen, if anybody is or has worked in a kitchen, you know that it's busy. When there's a line of people waiting for food, they want it fast. So you're rushing in the kitchen to get it out to them fast. And it's easy to take shortcuts, and that can make the food unsafe. Language and culture. If people are from a different country, has anybody been to another country or born in another country? Okay, so if things are different in different cultures around the world, or you might have somebody that doesn't speak English, and if you don't speak another language, or you don't have somebody else that can translate for you, that can be an issue. Literacy and education. You may have people that did not graduate from high school, and y'all are going to be college graduates. So you're going to communicate at a different level. Pathogens. Pathogens is an overall name for contaminants in food. And things have changed with pathogens and ways that they make people sick from, just over the last 30 years. Unapproved suppliers, we're going to talk about those guys a lot. Increase in high-risk customers, staff turnover. Restaurants are known for quick turnover of staff. It's especially bad right now because of all of the dust of the pandemic and folks not being sure if it's safe to work in a kitchen. Okay. So costs of foodborne illness. You're going to lose customers and sales. You're going to lose a reputation. There's going to be a big stamp on your front door that looks something like this, saying that you're closed because you can't meet the health department requirements. Negative media exposure. They used to have pictures of newspapers on here. I decided to put in Instagram because I think y'all find things out more there than on a newspaper. Lowered staff morale. You're somebody who takes care of things as far as putting out good food, but all of a sudden the building that you work in, they're putting out bad food and you don't want to be associated with that. So it's going to make you unhappy and it might make you want to leave. Lawsuits and legal fees. If you get somebody sick, they can sue you. Staff will miss work. They may get the same illness that the guest got, or they may be out looking for a job. Increased insurance premiums because you're going to have to pay out those lawsuits and legal fees, and that's what you have insurance for. You have to have staff retrained, make sure everybody understands what it is they are supposed to do. Okay, so usually an individual operation would have to spend thousands of dollars if they have a foodborne illness outbreak. It can go up to a lot more. Do y'all remember the Bluebell ice cream? Okay, I mean, they had factories all over the country and they had to close all of them down. So they lost all that business for over a year. So their loss was a lot more significant. So we have three main sources of food contaminants. Biological, chemical, and physical. We can go through all three of those. Biological contaminants, there are several of them. One is bacteria. So salmonella is an example of bacteria. There are viruses, hepatitis A and norovirus are the two biggest viruses that we'll talk about. Norovirus is the #1 cause of foodborne illness, and it spreads very quickly. Parasites. Bacteria and viruses are microscopic. You're not going to be able to see them. Even if there's a billion of them, you're not going to be able to see them. Parasites, you may be able to see. And finally, fungi. So we go into a lot of detail on those in chapter 2. Chemical contaminants include all the cleaning supplies that we use, or sanitizers or polishers in the kitchen. What they're showing in this picture is somebody's cleaning, it's like a buffet line, and they're spraying a chemical and it's going to go right into the food. And that will make people sick. And then physical hazards. Things like metal shavings, you can get those by using a can opener, can. Staples will be in some of the packaging. Sometimes when you're quickly opening something, a staple can just go flying. Bandages, I've actually had that happen where I lost a bandage in some break dough, and that was a problem. Glass is especially bad because when it breaks and gets into something, you can't always see it. Dirt, you're bringing in fresh vegetables, they're probably going to have dirt on them, so we have to clean those things. And then we have natural objects as well. So the bones in a fish, or the like fits in a cherry or apple seeds. If somebody eats one of those, they could choke on it or crack a tooth. Okay, so we have 5 main risk factors for foodborne illness. First one is purchasing food from unsafe sources. A little bit later, we're going to define what an approved reputable supplier is. And those are the only people that we want to buy food from. Number 2, failing to cook food correctly. So if you serve undercooked chicken, there's a good chance you're going to get people sick. Holding food at incorrect temperatures. Anybody know what holding food is talking about? Like in a warmer? Okay. So it could be that, let's say you're running a buffet. It could be the warming unit at the buffet that breaks, and that temperature doesn't stay warm enough to keep food warm. The opposite can happen where you have to keep food cold on the buffet, and whatever unit you have doesn't work. It can also be when you have food delivered, you just let it sit out at room temperature before you get it into a cooler or a freezer. Okay, using contaminated equipment. So any type of tool that you have, from your knives, cutting boards, tongs, pots and pans, anything that's not clean and sanitized before you're using it, could be contaminating the equipment. And then the last one is practicing poor personal hygiene. So if you have staff members that aren't aware of what they need to do to come in clean and stay clean during the job, that can be a big problem. So time temperature abuse, cross-contamination, poor personal hygiene. This guy is scratching his arm. We're going to learn that at least 25% of the population has staphylococcus on their skin somewhere. And it's just the way that it is. So if you are scratching yourself, especially your head or your face, your ears, your nose, you could be transferring that bacteria into the food. Cross-contamination is when things are either stored or handled improperly. So the time temperature abuse, that happens when food stays too long at temperatures that are good for pathogen growth. So we have what we call a temperature danger zone. It goes from 41 degrees up to 135 degrees. So when it's in a cooler, we have to make sure our coolers are below 41 degrees. And then if we're cooking and holding something, we got to make sure that it's being held at least 135 degrees. The more time that it spends inside this danger zone, the more bacteria and pathogens can grow. Okay. So this includes your prep time, So if you pull out like 100 chickens and you've got to chop those into pieces to be fried, okay, that's going to take a long time. So the longer that it sits at room temperature, the more bacteria is going to grow on it. So we'll work in smaller batches instead of pulling out 100 chickens and then pull out 6. If the food is not cooked or reheated enough in order to kill pathogens, and we've got a chapter where we're going to talk about cooking temperatures for different types of foods. If the food is not cooled correctly, if you have a pot of chili that's simmering on the stove and you just carry it and stick it in a cooler and cover it up, it's not going to get cool fast enough. Okay, so cross-contamination. This is when pathogens are transferred from one surface or food to another. So like this is a big opportunity for cross-contamination here because we have raw chicken, we've got raw shrimp, we've got a cut lemon, fresh vegetables, sliced bread. Sliced bread is not going to be cooked further. We're probably going to make a sandwich on it. If we get some bacteria from the chicken on there, we're going to make people sick. So there's several ways cross-contamination can happen. We could have ingredients that are contaminated. Like it's pretty much a given that raw chicken is going to have some bacteria on it. And that might be added to food that receives no further cooking. So if you touch the raw chicken and you touch a salad, that can cause foodborne illness. When ready-to-eat food touches contaminated surfaces, so if you're working like a barbecue grill and you're doing chicken, and you've got one platter and one set of tongs, you carry your raw chicken out on the platter, use the tongs for the raw chicken. Let's say you cook all the chicken and then you go put it back on that platter. You're just putting it back onto the bacteria that was on the platter. You would need a clean, sanitized platter. If you're working with multiple items, you got to make sure that the tongs you're using are not like touching raw chicken and then another item, especially something that's going to be ready to eat. Contaminated food touches or drips fluids onto cooked or ready to eat food. That's an issue that can happen while you're storing it or while you're cooking it. A food handler can touch contaminated food and then touches ready to eat food. So somebody might ask you to help carry some raw chicken out for them to prep, and then you might go and start making sandwiches. Contaminated wiping cloths touch food contact surfaces, and that's important. We have sanitation buckets, but there's a limit as to how much they can do. And wiping up raw chicken liquids and then carrying that over and wiping off a cutting board for salads is going to transmit the bacteria. Okay, poor personal hygiene. The biggest thing is hand washing. So we're going to talk a lot about hand washing in this class, when and how to do it. Of course, it's very important that you wash your hands after you use the restroom. If you cough or sneeze on the food, or if you cough or sneeze into your hand and then don't wash your hands, if you touch or scratch wounds and then touch food, if you come to work while you're sick, that can be an issue. Poor cleaning and sanitizing. The biggest thing is everything needs to be washed, rinsed, and sanitized in between uses. So it's not like you're at home. Typically you put stuff into a dishwasher, or if you're washing it in a sink, you wash it you rinse it and then somebody dries it. In a commercial kitchen, you have to do the sanitation stuff. Food contact surfaces are wiped clean instead of being washed, rinsed, and sanitized. Again, because of the time, people are in a rush, they're just going to take a wet cloth and wipe down the table, but that is not going to get rid of viruses or bacteria. Wiping cloths are not stored in a sanitizer solution between uses. And that's something that the health department looks for. They'll come in when you're busy and they'll be watching what everybody does. And if somebody uses a sanitizer towel and just sets it on the table when they're done, they'll get written up for that. Sanitizing solutions are not at the required levels. We use chemical sanitizers, so we'll talk about the levels that we need for those in a later chapter. Okay, 2 types of food most likely becomes unsafe. First one is called TCS food, and the second is ready-to-eat food. So TCS food is food that requires time and temperature control to limit pathogen growth. And that bottom phrase, time and temperature control for safety, that's what we're going to be saying. So we have quite a few foods that are considered to be TCS. Any type of poultry, fish or shellfish, or crustaceans, any type of milk or dairy product, your shell eggs, meats including beef, pork, and lamb, baked potatoes, heat-treated plant foods, so things that you've already cooked, like rice, beans, or vegetables, tofu and soy products, sprouts and sprout seeds, sliced melons, cut tomatoes, or leafy greens. And this is an example of like how things change over time. When I was a student, we didn't have to worry about sliced melons, greens, or tomatoes. And then the last one is untreated garlic and oil mixes. So you've got to keep those foods out of the temperature danger zone. You keep them below 41 degrees or above 135. Okay, ready to eat food is food that can be eaten without further preparation, washing, or cooking. Okay, so cooked food, hot dogs, hamburgers, those are ready to eat. Washed fruit and vegetables, whether they're whole or cut. Deli meats are ready to eat. Bakery items, and even sugar, spices, and seasonings. If you work on a hotline, there's usually like little containers of salt and pepper and other spices available. You keep sticking your hands into there and going ahead and seasoning food. If you're working with something that has pathogens on it, you can actually transfer the pathogens to those seasonings. And then if somebody needs to season a salad and they grab your seasoning and they sprinkle that onto a salad, transfers the pathogens over to the salad. Okay, so high-risk populations, children that are preschool age, elderly people. How old is elderly? 65, good, I like that answer. Okay, that's generally accepted as elderly. People that have compromised immune systems. Oops. Okay. usually there's more information about that. It could be somebody with HIV/AIDS or going through chemotherapy or cancer treatment. The other one is transplant recipients. All of those folks have weakened immune systems. Okay, so the person in charge has to be a certified food protection manager. So by earning the certificate in this class, you would be a certified food production manager. Um, there needs to be one of these people on site at all times while the operation is operating. So when the health department comes in, there has to be somebody that has this certification on site. Um, and then they have to show that they have the required knowledge. So what Louisiana does is require you to post the certification of the people on duty in a place where the public can see it. Okay, so to become a certified food production manager, there are other programs. ServSafe is a very common one. But whichever one it is, it has to be approved by a conference for food protection. Okay. So why is it important? Um, Y'all are familiar with the CDC? We've been in the news a lot. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Having a certified food protection manager reduces the risk of foodborne illnesses. It was a distinguishing factor between restaurants that experienced an outbreak and those that had not. And then the Food and Drug Administration has done studies that suggest that it's more having this person on the job is more effective control of risk factors for foodborne illness. Okay, so when I have this red star for things that you have to memorize, so key practices for ensuring food safety, purchasing food from approved reputable suppliers, controlling time and temperature. So it means that we've got to do things like make sure our coolers are at the right temperature, that food is not sitting out too long during the prep period, and then after it's cooked, it's handled properly. It's either held above 135 degrees or it's cooled down properly. We also have to prevent cross-contamination, practice personal hygiene, and then have good cleaning and sanitizing methods in place. Okay, so recommended responsibility. We've got 10 safety responsibilities of a food service manager. So manager has to be sure that food handlers are regularly monitoring food temperatures during hot and cold folding. So if you are running a buffet, you want to have a temperature log that you take at regular intervals. Ensure that the food that you're serving is not prepared in a private home or where people are living or sleeping. Restrict people other than food handlers from prep storage and dishwashing areas. ensure that the folks that do your maintenance and deliveries follow food safety practices. Monitor staff hand washing. So keep your eyes open when you're in the kitchen. Um, if you see somebody like touching their cell phone, taking a phone call or something during their shift, they got to wash their hands before they can go back to work. 6, monitor deliveries to ensure food is safe. So the person we have in charge of that has to make sure that they are getting the food from an approved source, that it's coming in at the correct temperatures. We've got a list of all the temperatures you need to receive TCS food. Um, it's protected from contamination, so we don't have damaged containers, and that it's accurately presented. Okay. Ensure TCS food is cooked and cooled correctly. So I mentioned we're going to learn the minimum temperatures for cooking different foods. Temperatures have to be checked with calibrated thermometers. In the photograph, we have a picture of what's called an instant read thermometer. Bless you. And then food is cooled rapidly, and we have guidelines for timing and taking temperature of foods that are cooling off. Number 8, ensure that the guests are properly notified. So you have to have consumer advisories if you're serving any type of raw or partially cooked food. So it should either be on the menu or on signs or table tents in the restaurant. You have to make sure that the guests know to use a clean plate if they're going back to a self-serve buffet. And especially that they're not taking their silverware up and using it to scoop things out of the buffet containers. Monitor your staff and ensure that you train them on food safety practices, including cleaning and sanitizing, handling your ready-to-eat food, allergy awareness. Anybody have a food allergy? Okay, we're going to be talking about that because that's a very important thing these days. And also reporting illnesses and symptoms. We're going to go through a whole list of reasons for you to stay home from work. And then finally, your food safety procedures have to be written down, implemented, and maintained. So implemented means you've got to train the staff, you've got to show evidence that you're monitoring for these things. And maintaining them is like keeping track of when you make changes to it and keeping a record of that. Okay. So display your commitment to food safety, offer training to your employees. You know, a lot of employers pay for their employees to go take this class. And if you have to recertify every 5 years for this, for serve safe management. So there are a lot of community weekend courses offered through the Restaurant Association. And now there's even an online course that you can take. Discuss food safety expectations. So you're going to be doing things in your restaurant, and every restaurant is going to be a little bit different. So there may be things that you're handling that you're going to have to take special care with. Document and maintain food handling procedures. So you need to have this in writing and be able to show like that you have trained people on how to handle food safely. You consider offering awards and rewards for good food safety records, because you want to encourage everybody to handle the food correctly. Set a good example. So as a manager, don't go around dressed like a slob and touching your face and then going ahead and working with food, not putting gloves on at the correct time. And then the other part of that is when you see somebody doing something incorrectly, you've got to take immediate corrective action, because everybody has their masks up right now, so that's great. But if I don't correct people when they're not wearing their mask properly, then everybody in the room is going to think, okay, it's okay for me to pull my mask down. And that's going to defeat the whole purpose of wearing masks. Okay, and this is just a picture of the, we called the A-Team. We did a dinner in New Orleans last week or the week before, I don't remember. So that's the end of chapter 1. Does anyone have questions? Yes.
Cook like food, and then you put it back in the container whenever it's raw. But you were gonna put it in food that was gonna boil in like a few hours. Is that okay?
So you're going to partially cook beef, and then you're going to put it back into the container. How long is it going to stay in that container?
Or until you get the rest of the food out of 20 minutes.
Usually things don't work that way. Like if you're making a stew, you're gonna cut your meat into the individual bite-sized portions, and you're gonna brown it off, and then go from there. So you might pull the meat out and set it. I would never put it back into the original container. Set it into a clean bowl. Go ahead and put your vegetables. If you did it by mistake, as long as it was going to be cooked fully afterwards. But like as a general rule, like when you're working with that kind of stuff, you take the stuff out of the container and then you dispose of the container. So it's like not even, wouldn't be possible. Anything else? Okay, we'll see you on Wednesday morning. Or I'm sorry, today is Wednesday. We'll see you on Friday morning.